Dímelo, mi gente, Marcucci here, again, Mariano Del Brio, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Logan Manhunt. He is one of the state representative, one of the youngest state representative in all South Dakota, a
Mhm.
little bit younger than me, so it's an honor to have you. Thank you so much for your work. You work with President Donald Trump. You were on his campaign. I've seen your work. You're married too. Congratulations on that, and you want to make South Dakota just a better overall place. So thank you so much for responding. And without further ado, Mr. Logan Man, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for reaching out and connecting. This should be fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about your story about South Dakota. I personally haven't been, but I wanted to go. Uh, what's there to do? How's the economy over there?
What's there to do? That's always a question people want to know. I wouldn't recommend coming here in the winter. I am 26. I'm currently the youngest legislator out of between the House and the Senate. I'm the youngest legislator, and the big thing in South Dakota economy wise is farming. On the east half of the state, there's quite a bit of fishing. On the west half of the state, you've got like the Black Hills, so hiking and Mount Rushmore and all that stuff. A lot better for tourism. So that's just kind of the if you're coming to South Dakota from the outside, those are some of the things you're going to see. The Black Hills in the west and a lot of cornfields in the east. And one of the things that I brought up this session was trying to get South Dakota to have a Bitcoin reserve. It did technically allow for other digital assets, but really the impetus was on Bitcoin. We wanted to clarify that.
Perfect. So how did you get into Bitcoin? How did you get into crypto? And me personally, I've always wanted to go to Mount Rushmore, so it's one of the things in my bucket list. So
Sure. Probably like anybody else, I had heard about it. I mean, the first time I ever heard of cryptocurrency was back in like 2017. I think I had a friend who was like mining this thing called Ethereum. I'm like, what the heck is that? Well, goodness, I wish I would have gotten in it then. But around 2021, the spring of 2021, I had a friend who was just showing me his crypto apps and all this stuff, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm in college. Let me take a crack at it. So I started dabbling in it a little bit, and I was buying a few coins here, buying a few coins there, getting Bitcoin, and then just over the years, just kind of paying attention to what's going on. I used to spend quite a bit of time on this app called Clubhouse. I don't know if it's still popular anymore, but uh, all these crypto people from around the world would get in these chat rooms and just they would just get into all these things. And I thought it was fascinating to hear. I'd be in a chat room with like the president of AT&T. I'm like, wow, this is exciting. Talking about who knows what, and that's really where it started. When I got to the legislature back in January. Actually, I did not have a plan on bringing a Bitcoin reserve bill, but I was on Twitter and I kept seeing all these other states pop up, and so I DM'd this guy. His name is Dennis Porter, and I think he's in Washington D.C. right now for that conference. I said, "Hey, I'd be interested in getting this done for South Dakota. What can I do?" And he immediately sent me a template for a bill to draft, and it was like 2 days before the deadline. So I quickly rushed in, get the bill drafted, and try to get it made up here in South Dakota.
wow, that's amazing. That's a great story. I remember a Clubhouse specifically. I remember
Mhm.
Donald Trump was on Clubhouse one
Sure.
time speaking. It was one of the earliest. So wow, you're a crypto OG just like me. Uh, so can you tell a little bit more about the bill? I think you guys can invest up to 10% of public funds and also
Right.
acquire some Bitcoin too, right? Just like important announcement yesterday, David Sachs announced and Donald Trump signed the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Bill that will allow the United States to keep hold of, I think it's 200,000 Bitcoins that we currently have and then being able to like acquire it
Mhm.
without affecting taxpayers and anything. So can you explain your bill in South Dakota?
The bill that I brought was purely permissive. It unfortunately it had no teeth in the sense that it was going to make the state buy Bitcoin. Just I would have loved to see it, but I don't think the stomach was even there for that. It wasn't even there for my bill, but it wasn't even there for that. So the bill just gave the state the option, the ability, the permission to invest in cryptocurrency, mainly in Bitcoin, because we want to make sure that the state had that ability. I think the next time we'll get a crack at it, unfortunately, will be next year. That's the next time we can bring a bill back. So it might be a little too late, but you know what? If we can do anything, it's better than nothing. And it was pretty basic. It gave the state the ability to invest in Bitcoin, kind of gave it instructions on how it could hold and reserve it and keep it safe and secure, and who exactly would retain the permission to access it and things like that, just so that they knew what they had the authority to do. Because right now it's pretty ambiguous. We could maybe make an argument that the state could consider Bitcoin as a digital asset, but you could easily say we don't have the right now to go and buy something like that.
Got it, got it. Perfect. And for those that do not know what Bitcoin is, how can you describe it? Like what is it for you? Because people have like different views on it, right? Like decentralized money,
Yep.
digital gold, a hedge against inflation. What is like what do you want to tell to the people of South Dakota that we could consider Bitcoin as, right?
So I've been listening to a lot of Michael Saylor recently, trying to just keep up with it, as I'm sure everybody else has, and I like the way he explained it. Uh, Bitcoin effectively is the first perfect currency. It's been used, the term digital gold has been thrown around, and that is also true in terms of its store of value. Uh, Bitcoin is completely transparent. It can be transferred instantly, and it can be owned independently by any individual. That it crosses every barrier of what we consider a store of value to be. I mean, when it comes to gold, well, you still have to what gold is worth to somebody may be a little bit different to somebody else, and historically, you'd have to convert it based on weight versus another currency, and that's supposedly the best that we have to offer. Gold is kind of the standard; it has been for all of the 20th century. Well, Bitcoin takes even a step above that. I mean, imagine if all of the United States' finances were on the blockchain instead of in some vault somewhere in the Pentagon. We wouldn't lose track of $4 trillion. We'd know where it went. Well, right now, the United States just somehow lost track of $4 trillion in the last 20 years or something crazy. And that's what's mind blowing about all this. Bitcoin won't solve is not the cure for cancer, but it will solve a lot of financial problems that we've just sort of agreed is inherent with dealing with dollars and your normal commodities.
Perfect, perfect. And you also mentioned, like custody and the state allowing custody of Bitcoin and other digital assets. Is it going to be like cold storage? Is it going to be like multi-sig wallets? Like, ha have you got into depth with that, or is still unsure?
We never really got that far. My build, so the way the South Dakota legislature works is there's basically four stops. There's a committee, there's the full House, then there's the Senate committee, and then the full Senate, and then the governor could sign it. Well, my bill unfortunately didn't get past the first hurdle. There was just too many questions there, so we didn't really get into that to answer your question. But probably cold storage, I'm sure, would be the safest way to go, or maybe just keep it on a device somewhere so that way you can access it and there's no you're not going to lose it. A physical copy somewhere. I don't know.
Perfect. And how does the legislature in South Dakota works? I love that different states have different like timing, like timelines, right?
Mhm.
Some states are slower because there's more people. Some states is shorter because there's less people, or they just like to work faster. Can you tell us a bit about the process? And you said that you can't introduce it until next year. If
Correct.
you were to introduce it next year, like what will be different?
So the way the South Dakota legislature works is there are 40 legislative days, meaning there's 40 days that the legislators themselves will be doing their job. Uh, it so not counting weekends, basically, is what I'm trying to say. We start probably the second week of January, first week of January, then go till about the middle of March. So next week will be my last week in the legislature. That's about 9 weeks in total, 40 legislative days, and that's it. That's the only time of the year that we get to make laws is those 40 legislative days. It's one of the shortest in the country. It's probably like the second or third shortest in the country. I think Nevada might have a little bit of a shorter legislative session, but only about half of that can me as a state representative actually introduce a bill. There's a cutoff point about halfway through where we can't introduce any more bills. We've just got to work on the ones we've got as the House. The Senate has to do the same thing, and then eventually we have to swap. The bills that make it out of the House will go over to the Senate. The bills that make it out of the Senate will come over to the House. Then we get a crack at them. And the bills that survive those four steps that I described, the House committee, then the House, the Senate committee, then the Senate, and then the governor, five steps, those bills get signed into law. So I think it's about between a third and half of all bills that get introduced will go the whole distance, roughly, depending on the year.
Wow, there it's a lot of moving pieces. Can we fix that with blockchain? Is there a way to like fix all those steps or not really? I mean, Bitcoin and crypto aside, like I just feel like there's so many steps. And that might be fine because
Yeah.
you want to pass bills that actually help taxpayers, voters, everyone in your state. So I think it is fine, but I just think there's a lot of like, come here, come here, come here.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of steps, and I don't know. I've never thought about it if blockchain would fix that. I mean, part of the system being the way it is it was designed that way. I mean, once you if you kind of track a couple bills, there's a lot of sometimes terrible bills that do make it all the way through, and sometimes there's a lot of really great bills that just fall flat on their face. So the system is a little bit lengthy. That's on purpose. That's sort of inherent with the American Republican Democratic system that we've got here is it's supposed to be a little cumbersome. But all things considered, we do a lot of work in 40 days.
No,
Yeah.
I just imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are super busy and you guys do tremendous work. So I'm not gonna question a system that has worked for
Mhm.
so long. It's
Yeah.
just interesting. I mean, blockchain can definitely help out with these sort of stuff. But I want
Mhm.
to talk about Matt Clark. I think that's the state investing officer, right?
Yeah.
And he argued Bitcoin was like volatile and it lacked income generation, and it was like a tough sell for him. How do you respond to that, right? Traditionally, South Dakota, I don't know if you guys could talk about like the bonds or what you guys invest and how the different investments work. I mean, Bitcoin has had a tremendous growth, even being down from 110,000 to like 80,000 that is now or 90,000. It still has had tremendous growth. Like, how can we incorporate traditional finance and bonds into like this asset class?
Right. So Matt Clark, and we've got to know each other pretty well. He's the state investment officer for South Dakota. So he's in charge of kind of deciding how we're going to accrue wealth. So it's a pretty important job, and we've got to know each other pretty good over this conversation. Even though we do stand on opposite ends of this discussion. I mean, he's a very and he'll talk about it openly. He's a very traditional, very conservative investor, and it's worked well for South Dakota. I mean, anybody that's talked to him is he has done well, good things for South Dakota. Just he hasn't been convinced yet on the Bitcoin issue, and others haven't as well. I don't know all the details of South Dakota's investments. I know we don't do gold. We do have stocks. We do invest in stocks. I I mean, this is really a store of value. And Michael Saylor will say that if you're investing money in anything else but Bitcoin, you're wasting money. That's not really the point I'm trying to make, although I'm kind of starting to agree with him on that. Uh, the point is that South Dakota has always kind of led the way in being able to do things that other states haven't because we are kind of smaller. And I think Bitcoin is and would have been one of these things where it wouldn't be hard. We can get done in 40 legislative days. The governor can sign it, and we're already on the front edge of the crypto industry. And that was kind of my vision and something that I'd like to see happen. Getting a store value and keeping that wealth for the South Dakota citizens, so that the state can do the work for the citizens. That's really what the goal is.
Yeah. And he mentions that, there's not like income generating, but I could
Store
argue
about yeah. Sorry, I missed some of your question. Go ahead. Yep.
it's fine. I could argue there is income to be made if South
Mhm.
Dakota invested in miners and brought different businesses that could work in South Dakota, right? I mean,
Mhm.
South Dakota by no means is a small state. I mean, like
Right.
in terms of dimensions and
The
I
size, yeah.
think this can have definitely some income generating
Mhm.
from Bitcoin mining or other different industries that could come. But that's something for another day. If you could also talk about are there groups in South Dakota that are interested in Bitcoin or blockchain? How's the
Yes.
industry over there?
Yeah, there are, and I got to meet some of them when I brought my bill. There's a group down in Sioux Falls, which is the South Dakota Blockchain Institute. So they're obviously for crypto in South Dakota. I think they're a little bit more open to all digital assets. They're not as hyper Bitcoin focused. Though I did connect with Satoshi Action Fund, which is a national group, and one of their guys flew in to come testify. Quick guy. He's not much older than me. He's a lawyer and just knows Bitcoin. I think he's a Bitcoin onlyist. Like he doesn't own anything else. I think he only owns Bitcoin. I don't even know if he has dollars. I think he everything he owns is in Bitcoin. Um, when it comes to volatility, I know we talked about that. Uh, what are we? in the last 20 years, the amount of volatile ups and downs we've seen, even with the dollar, should make anybody skeptical. I mean, Enron scandal, the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, people lost their entire heritage because of some of these crashes. And so to say, well, Bitcoin's too volatile, well, everything's volatile. You just to what extent are you willing to accept? And although volatility can hurt, the volatility is where you make the most money.
Yeah,
If you're willing to invest on the front end, right?
100%. I mean, and the stock market has always continually gone up,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
obviously. But what people don't understand is when these crashes happen, a lot of companies go under, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
companies go bankrupt, and you're probably going to lose your money if you have your money stored in these companies that have gone bankrupt. Bitcoin cannot, as long as someone is out there willing to bid on Bitcoin, right? It will always be valuable. And we've seen different, I think the strategic reserve has opened up not just states here in the United States, because some states, I mean, Texas, Ted Cruz wants to become the oasis for Bitcoin. But all around the world, we're going to see different states adopting it and different nation states and nations adopting it. So if South Dakota can become one of the first ones, hopefully in the next couple of years, it will be really amazing.
That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. I think the conversation will happen, and maybe we'll talk about it. But just education is so important right now, especially when you get to the governments who are usually the last people to kind of step into the ring. It starts with the youth, and it goes up through the culture, it goes to the college campuses, and then the boardrooms, and then finally at the very end, the governments might step in and be like, "Huh, I wonder what this is all about." And so, yeah, education is super important.
Yeah. And what I like about this is that it's not like bipartisan by any means. I mean, Democrats and Republicans are both trying to make crypto
Right.
the hub, and the younger and older generations too. I mean, I met with Senator Durant from Massachusetts, and
Okay.
so he's up there in age, and he had a Bitcoin miner, and he loves Bitcoin. He talks about it with his friends. He's in different groups, so I love that. Bitcoin doesn't look for like age, race, gender, like anything. It's just sound money, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think we've gone over most of the topics. I don't know if you want to discuss anything more for the people of South Dakota, your voters, your constituents, and yeah, how can South Dakota lead in the crypto innovation?
Educate. Yeah, that's the biggest thing is especially for the older legislators, older policymakers in general. They just don't know, and there's plenty of young people that don't know either. That's probably the biggest thing right now. And had my bill come up 2 weeks later, I maybe could have got it a little bit further because basically, like 2 days after my bill died in the committee, Trump was like, "Hey, by the way, coming up, we're making a Bitcoin reserve pretty soon." I was like, a couple of days later, we might have changed the whole game. So education and telling, just kind of informing people, hey, what is cryptocurrency? What is Bitcoin? It is perfect money. It's perfectly scarce, easily transferable, almost instantly. It is and completely public. I mean that is what it is. It'll take 24 hours to transfer money from one person to another via a wire sometimes or whatever else. You could buy Bitcoin and transfer it instantaneously across the whole world. And that all of a sudden, to your point, it doesn't matter what race or what economic status you are or what gender. Everybody wants money. Everybody wants money, and they want good money that they can rely on, and that's what makes Bitcoin so cool.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Logan. I have to take you to Puerto Rico. So anytime you're in
Okay.
Puerto Rico, let me know. Your dad, you mentioned he's a musician. He was playing the trumpet over there. So yeah, thank you so much. Really small world, how that happened. But thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Hopefully you get reelected in South Dakota
Yeah.
so we can have more people bringing innovation and growth to the people over there. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Thanks, Marco. Gracias.